we stand here at Joppa, I want to read a couple of scriptures that we've already been hearing about. I preached on this just a couple of nights ago before coming on this trip from a couple of different aspects. We won't have time to go through all of the book of Jonah, but a couple of things I would like to point out that George has already been sharing with us. This is a very significant place for many reasons, but two important Jewish people had two important encounters here, and they were to a certain degree struggling with the very same issue. Both of them were struggling with a prejudice issue in their lives. And both of them were being sent by God or being prepared by God to go to minister to a people group that they didn't really want to go minister to. One, of course, was Jonah that God was sending to the Ninevites. And then we have the situation of Peter that God was getting ready to send to the Gentiles. And both of these men were people who were very proud of their Jewish racial background and tradition, and they really did not want to go where God was sending them. And so very first, Jonah, it's interesting that when the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the Bible goes on to say that God said to him, go to that great city of Nineveh. And one of the things, I spent a great deal of my time traveling and ministering in the great cities of the world. Saul, the rabbi, he constantly went to the great cities. And when you read Scripture and when you read secular history, the great cities of the world are the great challenges that the world faces. And I could just go through a litany of some of the great cities of the world that we're involved in. The Joshua Project that identifies some of the great problem cities of the world has identified 100 gateway cities, as they're referred to, that are great spiritual strongholds and therefore great strongholds of opposition, of darkness, of places where the gospel has not been to. I think of Kathmandu, Nepal, where I will be right after this trip. Kathmandu, Nepal is a great city. It's a city where two of the most important temples in the world, one, the Botana Temple for Buddhism and the Pashupati Temple for Hinduism, are located in that city. So it's a place of pilgrimage for Hindus and Buddhists from all over the world. In Lhasa, Tibet, north of that, the Potala Palace that Pat and I have visited, there again, that is the seat of Lama Buddhism. And we, of course, hear a great deal about the Dalai Lama. And so Lhasa is one of the great strongholds of the world. South in India, in a place called Calcutta. Calcutta is dedicated, it's named after Kali, the god Kali. And Kali is this god that has the tongue stuck out, that must constantly be have blood sacrifices in order to have the wrath of Kali. And therefore Calcutta is one of the darkest places in the world. Mecca, it's one of the strongholds, obviously, for the Islamic faith. Jerusalem that we're visiting, obviously, a great spiritual mega point for the three great monotheistic religions of the world. And so the point is, all over the world, there are great cities that God is concerned about. And God sent Jonah to one of those great cities. Now, the prophet Nahum also prophesied against, and that little brief book also is primarily a prophecy against the city of Nineveh that God sent Jonah to. And the prophet Nahum there called Nineveh the city of blood. If you go back historically, you see that Nineveh had its origin with Nimrod, the mighty warrior, the hunter of men, and therefore it was central in Babylon. There's only one city that is mentioned more than Babylon in the Bible, and that is the city of Jerusalem. And all the way through, we see these two great cities juxtaposed to each other. Jerusalem, the city where God set his name, and Babylon, the great harlot, that is the antithesis of everything that Jerusalem stood for. And so God sent a man by the name of Jonah, and he said, the wickedness of this city has come up to me. Now, we will shortly be seeing also another great twin cities of the plain of the Dead Sea, Sodom and Gomorrah, that the wickedness came up to God. And he, like he sent Jonah, there he was sending in his people. He was sending in Abram and Lot to have a ministry there. So the point is, God has a concern and a compassion for the great cities of the world. And so God was saying to Jonah, I want you to go to that great city of Nineveh and preach judgment. It wasn't really a message of grace. I mean, it's almost like he had the classical placard. He didn't even say turn or burn. He just said in 40 days, you're going to burn, baby, and it's going to be the end of you. But in God's marvelous grace, there was a great revival. There was a great repentance from the people up, from the king down. And as a result of that, God relented in his judgment against that great city. And so it really challenges me how the book of Jonah ends. Of course, we know that Jonah went down to Joppa. It's interesting to me, the downward spiral of that. He went down to Joppa. He went down in the boat. He went down in the sea. Why? Because he was fleeing from God. When you're fleeing from God, you always go down. And, when you're fleeing from God, you ultimately become so nauseating that even a fish can't stomach you. And so the fish threw Jonah up ultimately in God's sovereignty. And again, you see God's sovereignty all through this, that God sent the storm. He sent the fish. He sent the gourd that grew. He sent the worm. He sent the whirlwind. He sent everything. God is totally in control of the whole situation. And so as the story of Jonah ends, it ends with a question. And I think it's a question that has continued to reverberate down through the centuries, where God said, and should I not have compassion for that great city? Now here Jonah is really displeased that God has chosen to exercise and be who he is. He said, I knew you were a compassionate God. I didn't want you to exercise. I wanted you to burn those people. Sort of like James and John, sons of thunder, who said, when the Samaritan, Lord, you want us to rain down fire and brimstone. Well, that was sort of Jonah's attitude. And if we're honest, we all have to realize that there are people groups in the world that we just assume God zap. We don't want God to redeem them. We don't want God to do anything significant among them. And so that was the prejudice that Jonah was dealing with. He went outside the city and is just sort of sitting and watching and hoping that God is going to really zap the city and rain down judgment. And you know how the gourd comes, gives him shade. God sent the worm. The gourd dies. He's sitting out there in the blistering sun. And he goes into what we would call a suicidal depression, where he said, it's better for me to die. And so here Jonah is more concerned. And to me, this is the great challenge of Jonah. Here he was more concerned about his comfort sitting out there under a wilted gourd in the hot sun than 120,000 people that were about to perish. And boy, that's the picture to me of a lot of American Christians. We're far more comfortable with our Christianity, far more comfortable with just being comfortable where we are, and forget the great needs of the world, the people that are suffering, the people that are hurting, all of the 10 million AIDS children in Africa. All we want to do is just stay comfortable right where we are. And so, here he is sitting like us in his little place of comfort, wanting to just be comfortable there. And God sort of remonstrates with him. And he said, and should I not be compassionate about this great city of 120,000 people, not to mention the cattle, who do not know their right hand from their left, which is God's biblical way of saying they don't even understand. They haven't had the privilege of Torah. They don't know my law, and they're living in ignorance. They're living in disobedience, and they're going to destruction. So should I not be concerned about that great city? And that's the thing that compels me constantly to go to Calcutta, to go to Bombay, to go to Nairobi, to go to Calcutta, to go to Kathmandu, to all of these cities that we're involved in, to try to make a difference there, because Jesus said we're to be salt and light. And then many years later, God was getting ready to send another Jew who was struggling with another kind of prejudice. And, again, his name was Peter. And Peter, as far as he was concerned, he was a true blue Jew through and through. And he really wasn't that concerned about the Gentiles, the Goyim like you and me. We wouldn't be here if he wouldn't have been obedient to that heavenly vision. And so God did a very, very dramatic work, starting here at Joppa in the lives of two people. So that's the thing that I just challenge us as we're here to think about. Are we just so consumed, like like Jonah was with his own little comfortable world and forgetting the great cities that God has a great compassion for? Or do we, like Peter, sort of just want to stay slumbering? Rabbi Paul said to the church at Ephesus, wake up, arise from your sleep, shake off your slumber. And, Peter sleeping on the housetop is sort of a picture to me of the sleeping ecclesiastical giant called the American church. And, God has to arouse us and say, look, there's a great world out there. There's a great need. There are great cities. There are Corneliuses. There are Ninevites. There are all kind of people that need my compassion, and they're not going to have it unless you receive it or you go out and send it for me. So, I just challenge you as we start this trip, this is where Jonah started to run. We want to run not from God. We want to run for God to all of the places that he wants us to go. And Joppa is a great reminder of that.